Well, hey ceramic students, it's Mrs. New here. Welcome back. Today we are starting a new project which is going to be so much fun. This is the Dragon Eye project. Oh, aren't these so cool? So here's one that's all glazed. You can see the glass eye there. And then I have a couple that are just bisque fired because I do want to show you a special glazing process for this project. But this project is a slab project, so you can see the back is a slab, but this project is all about texture. So how can you create different textures for your dragon eye to really make it look like a dragon? So think of the movies like How to Train Your Dragon. Think about all the different kinds of creative ways that the artists in that movie made different dragons. So for this project, you are going to need a glass eye. Now I have tons of different glass eyes to choose from and all different colors. So you want to consider that when you're choosing your glazes. When you pick your glass eye, it's really important that you wrap it in a little piece of plastic wrap. The reason for that is on the back of the glass eye is just a piece of paper that's glued onto a glass like cabochon basically. So what I'm going to need to do is take my saran wrap and I'm going to need to really wrap my glass eye at least once. I could probably cut off a little bit of this extra on the back so that none of the water or the moisture from the clay can get onto the glass eye. Now these glass eyes that are wrapped in plastic are not going to go in the kiln. Obviously, if these went in the kiln at 2000 degrees, these would melt down into nothing. So the idea for this is what you do is you actually create the whole thing, you glaze fire it, and at the very end, boop, you just glue it into place with a little epoxy or some hot glue. And so adding the eye back into the design is one of the last steps. But it's nice to choose your eye ahead of time because then you can kind of build around the eye and really it helps to kind of like plan out your design if you can kind of have it there as you're making your design. Now the other thing you're going to get for this project, I'm going to move my glass eyes aside here, is a worksheet that has some templates on it. So forgive me, this one's already been cut out, but you're going to put your name and period, and then this is going to become the template. And on this side, you can do your drawing, and on the top is the template that you're going to cut out. So for this one, I already did my drawing and cut that part off, so sorry about that. And you can see there are different shapes. So there's 4 different shapes here. So you can really choose which shape you want to do. Do you want to do kind of a football shape, an oval shape, a kind of arrowhead shape, or sort of a round or more round shape? And it's really up to you. But what I want you to do is start with a sketch. So it says, sketch your dragon eye sculpture on this piece. Sketch beyond the edges. Your sculpture will need to extend beyond the edge of your base piece. So remember, even though that is the base piece, really your sculpture can go off the edges of that. So if we flip these over, these examples, we can see kind of how that works. So this is a really fun project. You really need to pay attention to your slipping and scoring, but it can be really fun. So I'm going to go ahead and move these aside and I'll show you how to get started on this. All right, so now I've got my piece of clay here, and I'm just going to go ahead and use this one here. So I will need to take a minute and just cut it out, cut out the shape. Okay, and it doesn't have to be exact, but somehow cut out the shape here because this is going to be our design. And I also have my glass eye that's ready to go with the saran wrap. So now I'm just going to go ahead and cut the shape out, and I've already rolled out a slab. I just used the slab rolling sticks, the one with the, I think it has the triangle on both sides. And I'm not going to get rid of all this extra. I am going to keep all this extra because I am going to be adding more pieces to this piece. But now that I have my base piece, I'm going to put it on a wear board. So I'm just going to grab a small board and kind of get it onto a board. And now is really where the fun part starts. I want to think about where I'm going to actually put the eye. So is it going to go, smack dab in the middle, most kids are kind of putting them sort of closer to one side or the other, but it's really up to you. I'm going to go ahead and put mine on this side. And what I'm going to do is just make a little slit, which is about the same width of the eye, into my background slab here. And then I'm just going to carve out and make a little hole, but I don't want to make it too big. Okay, so maybe use your eye as a guide, because I want the eye to sort of peek out from behind here. So if you can kind of see like that. In fact, you could even put your eye, glass eye behind here. Now the other thing I want you to do with your glass eyes when you get them is I want you to write your name on the back of the paper before you put the saran wrap over them. Okay, so then you know it's yours. I also want you to keep it in your cubby drawer. Don't put it in your backpack. In other words, don't lose your eye. Okay, once you get one eye, that's all you get. So you got to hang on to it until the end of this project. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I can see it peeking out. Now is the fun part. Now is the point where I can really add texture to this design and add more things. So how do I do that? Well, one thing I could do is take all my scrap slabs that I'd had here and I could use a texture mat. That's a really easy way to create a little bit of texture. This one seemed appropriate to me. It kind of looks like dragon scales. So what I can do is just pop that on there, grab a little rolling pin, and roll that on there. Now again, I kept all of my scraps for this part. And I want you to maybe do a little visual research. Maybe you could go onto Google Images and look up, pictures of different dragons or different, even dinosaurs, right? Aren't dinosaurs kind of like dragons? And maybe get some ideas, press kind of hard and get some texture on there. So that's a really quick way to make texture. So you can see on this example piece, that's what this artist did down here, is they used a texture mat to start off with. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut out some pieces, and I want to extend my design past the back slab. Okay, so what kind of shapes could I cut out? Well, maybe I'm going to cut out, kind of oval shapes. Maybe they're going to be oval shapes. One of the other things to think about with this project, you guys, is repetition. So repetition is a design principle. There's rhythm in repetition. And so if I was a dragon, I would probably have some kind of scales or something. And my guess would be that there might be some repetition of shapes that could come off the edge. So pick a shape. It could be more of like a leaf shape, kind of like this one, or more of a pointy shape. And remember, some of these pieces are going to extend past the back slab, so make sure that they are not too thin so that they don't break. Okay, I'm just going to set this one up here, but I'm just going to do this one with some rounded shapes. And I really am going to just use all of my scrap here. Now I'm going to do repetition. I also want to have a little bit of visual variety, so I don't want like maybe every single shape to be the same size. So maybe they're the same shape, but maybe some of them are smaller. Maybe some of them are bigger. How could I overlap the shapes? Maybe I have some going like that or something like that. So whatever I decide to design, obviously I would need to slip and score pieces on, blend them on. Another thing that can work really well besides just slab pieces are coils. So coils are going to be small little snakes of clay. So this artist did that right in here. So I could take some of my scrap. I could make little coils or little snakes. And I could make some spirals like this. Maybe that spiral comes around the edge of the eye opening. I think that could look really nice. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see that. Okay, so again, what could you do up here? And that a coil might look nice. And if I'm going to put a spiral on one side, maybe I would repeat that design and do some repetition and put the spiral on the other side, maybe on the upper part of the eye. Another thing that can look really nice with this one are just little, kind of little balls of clay. So I could do something like this, where I just make little circles, roll them in my hands. And again, thinking about repetition, I could vary the size. Maybe they kind of get smaller as they go back this way. I want to fill all of my background slab with design work. So I don't want to have anything left plain. And if I do have areas that are left plain, then I want to continue to think about adding texture. So maybe I take a stamp and I press in some kind of texture down here. Okay, I could do that with a loop tool or a stamp, but I really want the whole thing to be covered in texture. Now, if you're putting little pieces on like these, I want to give you kind of a hint here. It's kind of hard to scratch and attach, but we do need to do that, right? We need to make sure that it's going to stay. So I could do a little scratching with a needle tool, but if it's a very, very small piece, sometimes you can get away with just putting kind of a bigger blob of slip on here. So make sure to be generous with your slip when you're attaching things. And as long as that slip kind of what I call mooshes out the sides. So you want, see how it's mooshing out? You really want that to stick on there really well. So now I'm going to do a little bit more scoring here. But if it's a really, really tiny piece, so let's say I'm trying to put, you know, a teeny tiny little ball on there. Do what you can to do some scoring, but then really put, you know, a big blob, a slip, and then let that moosh out the sides. So that'll look a little messy at first, but I can always go in with a wet paintbrush when this gets more leather hard, and I can smooth that out. So you kind of get the idea, right? We're gonna design it. We're gonna go ahead and layer things, and we're gonna add texture and make sure all of it is covered in texture. Once we do that, it's really important that on the back, before it goes on the greenware shelf, that it has your name on it, because all of these will look a lot the same. And then you want to make sure to leave them nice and flat when you put them on the greenware shelf. So let's look a little bit more closely at a few of these. Again, here you can see these kind of leaf shapes have stamps stamped into them. Here you can see someone took the coil and actually twisted the coil around. This one has coils, and then the coil is stamped up on top of that. So lots and lots and lots of texture, okay? No, none of the back slabs should be showing, and if it is showing, you know, maybe it has some pressed in texture or a texture mat added to it. So once I get that all done, it's going to go on the greenware shelf. And let's talk next about the firing and glazing process for our eyes. Okay guys, so with the eyes, just a couple other things. Make sure to keep your sketch. You want to keep your sketch in your cubby drawer, because you know Miss New, she likes you to turn in your sketches and drawings. So if you have your sketch down here, just keep that in your cubby. You can staple and turn that in with your grade sheet at the end of the project. Also, when you put this on the greenware shelf, keep your eye in your drawer. Again, write your name on the back, keep it in your drawer. I don't need the eye on the greenware shelf. You want to keep that, but just go ahead and put the project on the greenware shelf, okay? Now, let's pretend, fast forward, that these have dried and they've been bisque fired. So let's talk a little bit about the glazing process for this. Now, we are going to be using something called the Elements glazes for this project, and the Elements are really, really cool. Now, what's cool about them is what you see is not necessarily what you get. They have more of an earthy look to them. And they just have some really interesting and different and more, what I would say, more muted colors to them. Now, another thing we're going to play with these projects is what's called a black mason stain. So that's what I want to do now. So these are bisque fired. So the next step I'm going to do is grab this container. It says black mason stain on the top and the side. We're going to have to share it, okay? It's a little bit like watercolor. And that's basically what it is. It's a stain. So it's a powder. Miss New has mixed up a black powder into water. And because it's mixed with water, sometimes it will settle. So the first thing I have to do with the black mason stain is I'm going to stir it up. I'm going to stir it up really, really well. Okay. The other thing I'm going to need is a sponge. I can use one of the small round sponges. I think this goes a little faster with a bigger sponge. So you can see I have used the black mason stain on this sponge because it also stained the sponge. So I will have this sponge sitting up with the black mason stain. So what I'm going to do with this is I am going to brush it on and then wipe it off. So let me show you what this is going to look like. Okay. I can actually hear it going down into the recesses of the clay. And the bisqueware is soaking up this black mason stain, okay? And I'm being generous with it. And what I'm trying to do is to get all of this stain to go down into all that hard work I did with all that texture. So it's going down into the crevices, all the little texture stamps I did or the texture mats. And so I'm brushing that on. I might give it a swirl as I'm painting just to mix up that mason stain, okay? And I'm applying it pretty liberally, meaning I'm putting quite a lot on there. It's kind of like painting with watercolor. Do you remember those watercolor palettes when you were younger? So I'm going to put this all over. Now you're saying, well, I don't want my dragon eye to be black. Well, the reason we're doing this, again, is just to accentuate all of the texture that you did. So it's not necessarily going to be a black project, but it's going to help those black, the texture to really stand out. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. All right, so now that I have it painted on, my next step is to wipe it off. So I'm going to get my sponge wet over here at the sink. I'm going to get my sponge wet, and now I'm going to take my sponge and wipe it off. So hopefully you can kind of see what that is doing. Now again, your fingers might get a little stained. The sponge is a little stained. Now see how I'm wiping it off the top, but look at all that texture. Again, that's the whole point of this project, is to really play around with how can you create textures with clay. There's so many different things we can do, but look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? So I can wipe as much or as little as I want. I would want to make sure most of it is covered so it has a uniform look. So I'm even going to go behind some of these parts here a little bit. I don't want to do the whole back of it, but just on the edges. Okay, make sure it's all covered on the edges, and you can wipe as much as you want to. Now, if you missed a spot, you can always go back in, maybe with a little smaller brush, and you could put like a little bit more in there if you missed a spot. But you're going to kind of put it on and then wipe it off. And now that I've done this part, I mean, look at the difference. Now I can really get in here and start working with some of the elements glazes. So let me show you those next. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these elements glazes. What you see is not what you're going to get. So for example, this one, well, I couldn't find the test style for that one, so let's start with a different one. This one is called wheat. It looks black. That looks black to me, but guess what? This is not going to be black. This is the color wheat. Look at that. It's kind of a yellow color. Isn't that interesting? So the elements glazes are ones that will do different things. Now, not all of these are food safe. This one is called Stormy Blue. If I look at it, it kind of looks like a pink color, but when I look at the test tile for Stormy Blue, you can see it's going to be more of a blue-green color. So if you're not sure what the elements glaze is going to look like, check the test tiles. Hopefully I have most of them. Now I also grabbed sea green and I didn't find the test tile for that one. So if I'm missing a test tile of a color, let me know. It just depends on what they have at the store when I go shopping. What I'm going to do now, I've got my mason stains on here. I've got my elements glazes. So I'm going to go ahead and start painting different parts of my dragon eye with the elements glazes. And you're thinking, well, you just put glaze on and wiped it off. Well, that actually wasn't glaze. That was a mason stain. That was a little different, wasn't it? But I still want to have some areas of my dragon eye that are shiny, right? And I can go right over the top of any of the black mason stain that I put on, and it will just, again, it will just help to accentuate that. Now, any parts that I don't paint will not be shiny, and I kind of like that look for this particular project. So I can go in there, I can be selective with whatever shapes I want to paint with the elements glazes. Okay, I can think about what different colors might look good together. And elements glazes do a lot of fun things with texture as well. So these are a couple different glazing techniques that we perhaps haven't done when you're watching this video and doing this project, okay? So I want you to experiment with the elements glazes, try the mason stain technique, and then get in there and, you know, paint parts of the designs with the different elements. And what you're going to end up with is something a little bit more like this one, where it's got these muted colors, but you can really see all of the texture. And again, you can just paint right over the top of any of the mason stain work you did. So for instance, if I want to have some of that stormy blue, let's say I want to put that over around the eye, I can go ahead. Now I could also put these in a palette, but I've got clean brushes, so I can just dip right in here. So see how I can just go right over the top of any of the mason stain work I did. So I'm going to pick and choose the different shapes that I have here and what I'd like to accentuate. Okay. Now if I want all of it to be shiny, then I could do this part and then put a clear coat over the whole thing. But honestly, I think for this project, it looks kind of cooler if parts of it are a little matte, and then parts are shiny with the elements glazes. So have fun with the glazing part of this. It's definitely a fun part of this particular project, okay? And once I do all of that and it gets glaze fired, of course, the final step is to take my eye that I've got my name on it, and I'm gonna get either a hot glue gun or some epoxy. I can unwrap it now, and I'm just going to glue the eye in the back, and that would be the final step. So I hope you guys have fun with the Dragon Eye project. I think you will really like this one as a slab project. Remember, think about texture, texture, texture. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.